Hello, and welcome to the Commander's Vault MTG. My name is Joe, and I am an Army veteran, and I like to try to apply the tactics I learned in the military towards deck building for Magic the Gathering, specifically Commander. So today, we're going to go over Animar, Soul of the Elements. This is actually one of my wife's decks and one of her favorite decks to play. So let's get into it today. Animar, Soul of the Elements. Okay, if you don't know about Animar, Animar is one of the original boogeymen, and probably one of the best mistakes that Magic made when printing a card. So Animar has protection from white and from black, so think about all the best removals, don't work. And whenever you cast a creature spell, you put a 1/1 counter on Animar. Then, if that isn't bad enough, creatures you cast cost 1 less for each counter on Animar. So when we went to build this deck, the things that my wife wanted specifically was she actually wanted an elemental tribal or elemental kindred deck. So when we went about this, we decided we were going to enlist the help of our LGS Flip Table Games in Stoughton, Wisconsin, and we sat down and really started looking at all of the elementals and what they could do to help support this deck. And there are some pretty awesome elementals across the history of Magic. So in this deck, we are running 37 creatures. A very, very creature-heavy deck, but honestly, you're not looking for a lot of interaction in this. You're just looking to put the pedal to the metal and go. That is the point of this deck, is cast Animar, get the counters up, cast your big stuff, and go. And when that strategy works, it is amazing. We're only running 5 sorceries, we're running 6 instances, 5 artifacts, 11 enchantments, and 35 lands. So let's get into the deck real quick, and let's talk about it. So the first one that we've got up here is the Bramble Familiar. This was a Wilds of Eldraine. It's a mana dork that also, for the adventure side of it, lets you mill cards and then put creature, enchantment, or land that you milled onto the battlefield. And also, you can bounce this back to your hand. This card, when played right in the right deck, can be really broken because it's easy to get down early. It counts as a mana rock. You can bounce it back to your hand to play it down on the field, which will give Animar his counters. You can bring it back to your hand when you have enough mana to cast it for the adventure sorcery side to get stuff out, and then you can recast it again as the creature side, bounce it back to your hand, then cast it again for that sorcery side again. So if you play this right, you can get several activations out of this. Brushfire Elemental, can't be blocked. It's got a landfall trigger of getting counters. This is also one of the cheaper creatures in the deck to get down that helps buff Animar up. We have 3 of the Cavaliers in here. The Cavalier of Flame, the Cavalier of Gales, and the Cavalier of Thorns. Each one of those has their own buffs that they do, and these usually come down for the 3 colors that they are. Chandra's Embercat, this is a mana dork specifically for elementals. Cloud Thresher, this is great for any of the little flyers out there, any of the Ornithopters, any of the regular 1/1 Thopters. This kills all of them as soon as it hits, and it does damage to each person. This is a new one. We actually cracked a pack of Dominaria Remastered, and this was in it. We're like, okay, cool. If you have 3 counters on Animar, which is super easy, you cast this for 1 red, and then it gives you 3 red. This is just, in this deck, is a slam dunk. Craterhoof Behemoth, just the finisher. This is the finisher of the deck. Part of the problems with any 1/1 counter decks is getting through. So by this giving creatures the additional counters and trample, usually these creatures are pretty big, so this just makes it super easy. Creeping Trailblazer buffs your elementals, and it's super cheap to cast. Fertilid, again, cheap to cast, and it also enters with 1/1 counters, and you can take those counters off, and you can actually look for a land, which then can get you some of the landfall triggers that we have for some of the other things. Flamekin Harbinger. If you have an elemental deck, you want this card because it tutors up an elemental. Vigor or Fog Crawler, we pulled this out of the Fallout box that we had. And this is just another way for 1/1 counters, and that it just shuffles back into your library. Forgotten Ancient. This card is kind of nutty in this deck because it's cheap to cast. Anytime someone casts a spell, it gets a counter. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you can move any of those counters onto another creature. So let's say in a standard turn, you have 3 other opponents who all cast a spell, sometimes multiple spells. You're going to get at least 2 or 3 counters put on the Forgotten Ancient that you then put on Animar during your upkeep. And so you can have Animar go from 2 or 3 counters to 6 counters in 1 turn cycle. Foundation Breaker, great ETB effects. Green Warden of Marasa. Again, there's some fetch lands in here, so this just gets it back to your hand. And if it dies, you can exile this and get a card that was already taken out back to your hand. We have Halden and Paco in this deck, so Halden and Paco combo is absolutely nutty. Paco exiles the cards, Halden casts the cards, so you absolutely want to kill one of these two when they come down. Ice Rot Sentry, this was another Wilds of Eldraine one. This on attack can tap down stuff so you can get through on attacks. This works really good with Paco. Kami of Whispered Hope, so this will add an additional counter anytime a counter goes on something, and it's a mana dork that can get exponentially bigger. So if this gets counters on it, as you tap it, it adds additional mana, which is always a good thing. Leafkin Druid, mana dork. Maelstrom Wanderer. Someone actually told me this should be the commander of the deck, and I said no, because with Animar, you can make this only cost 3, which is absolutely nutty. This is a 9 mana card that does double Cascade and then gives all your creatures haste. It is not hard to get this out on like turn 4, turn 5, and that is just nutty. Magnetic Force. This thing just helps progress games faster. Nissa, if you're running an Elf Tribal or an Elemental Tribal, you should have this. Anytime you can play 2 lands, you're getting to tutor up an Elemental. Omnath of Mana. Omnath of Rage. Overgrowth Elemental. This just lets you put another 1/1 on any other elemental you control when it enters the battlefield. And when something else dies, you get you get life back, and you get to put 1/1 counters on it. Paco, part of that same combo we talked about. Phylanth, this guy, once he drops, you create a number of 0/1 plant tokens, and every time you play a land, they get 4 1/1 counters. We actually have this guy as a commander for one of Tasha's other decks, but this guy is broken in his own right. Risen Reef, just another cheap elemental. This is another Wilds of Eldraine one that's pretty good. So you can cast this for its adventure to bounce something back to someone's hand to include your own stuff, and then you can cast it for the creature side, and anytime someone casts a spell with mana value 3 or less, they take a damage. This is actually pretty good, especially in a game of Commander. There are plenty of things that cost 3 or less that you're just going to be pinging people for. Supreme Exemplar, this thing is a pain. When it comes in, you exile another elemental, then you have this guy come in, and he's already a 10/10, so you can exile something, and then if this dies, you can then return the other thing, and if you pick something as an ETB, you get that ETB again. Tectonic Giant, anytime it attacks, you get a whole bunch of options. Thicket Crasher gives everything trample. Thrix, a Sudden Storm, makes all of your big stuff cost 1 less on top of what Animar's already doing. Oh, and the other big thing here, they can't be countered either. So all your big stuff can't be countered. Titan of Industry just has really great ETBs. Vengevine, this one, my wife saw it and said this had to go in the deck. Regardless of what it does, it just needed to go in the deck. Zendikar Incarnate, power and toughness based on the number of lands. And then we get into the interaction. So, as far as the interaction goes, we've got the big ones are Decimate. This is just an oldie but goodie. Farseek and Rampant Growth. Get your lands out. Pick your poison. We talked about this one from Murders at Karlov Manor. This is just, it's starting to go in any deck we can put it in. Traverse Eternity, so a Doctor Who card. We've got a couple of 8 and 9 mana cards in this deck, so you're able to draw 8 or 9 cards off of this one card. It's pretty good. A couple different instants. Artifacts. The big artifacts we're running here is the Ozolith and Ozolith the Shattered Spire. So this allows additional counters, just like that Kami did. And then you can tap it to add counters. So it basically will add 2 counters. And then the Ozolith, this is really great with Animar, because if people do find a way to kill Animar, or he dies in combat or something, all those counters go to the Ozolith. And then you recast him, and then you can move all those counters back to Animar. This card with Animar is broken. Then we've got a lot of the payoff enchantments in the deck. We're looking to give things trample and haste. So this gives haste. This doubles the size, triples the size, impact tremors, card draw. Those are all of the things we're looking to do, and then 35 lands to round this out. So let's talk about Animar real quick in the games that we've played with him. So this is one of my wife's favorite decks. This is definitely one of her more powerful decks that she has, and I don't think this has lost very many times, or if it wasn't one of the final 2 cards standing. I think one of the ways this lost was to an infinite combo, which there was nothing that could have been done about that. And then there was one where her deck just didn't do any of the things that it should have done. So the really cool thing about this Animar deck is you would look at it on the surface and think it's got a lot of heavy mana cost things, but every time she's played, big stuff has come out. She's done absolutely phenomenal of knocking out at least 1 or 2 players single-handedly. And then if the Crater Hoof Behemoth comes out, that's just game every single time. So this is one of the just most straightforward combat-based decks. Get Animar big, cast all your big stuff, and just swing for the fences. That's the way this deck goes, and every time it goes, everybody at the table goes, oh my goodness. So guys, I hope you like this one. This is one of my wife's favorite decks, Animar Soul of the Elements. We will be opening up a Thunder Junction collector box here shortly. We're just waiting for it to get to our local game store. We'll be going to the pre-release events. We'll show you guys all the cards we're getting from there. And we hope you guys are all having a wonderful time. If you have any requests for deck lists, let us know. We've got quite a few. The next one we'll probably do is one of my CEDH decks and see if you guys like that. So Animar Soul of the Elements. This is my wife's, one of her top 3 decks that she really enjoys. So guys, until next time, find a group, shuffle up, play, support your local game store, and we'll see you next time.